Foreign direct investment driving development. Sustainable growth through knowledge transfer. Technology as a solution. Innovation as a way forward. Over 70 ministers, 140 countries, over 500 exhibitors, 8,000 square meters of exhibition, 15,000 businessmen and investors. The annual investment meeting, Sustainable Development through FDI-induced innovation and technology transfer.
Welcome to our distinguished guests and our distinguished panelists here. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we are trying to accomplish today will be an open-ended, if you will, informal discussion about the best policy mix for FDI in order to accomplish technology transfer and innovation. So we will approach it as a discussion between the panelists after a brief presentation, and also we will take questions from the audience. They can be directed in general, or they can be directed towards any from the panel, and there'll be a microphone made available to anybody who wishes to put a question towards the end of the session. We're running a bit late because we're waiting for people to finish lunch and find this place. But we will start now. And what we will start with is a brief introduction by each of the panel members. We can see here the names of all the panelists here who have crossed several continents to come here today. We have representatives from Africa, from Nigeria, we have representatives from Brazil, we have from London, we have from the Middle East, and we have from Europe and America. So we have really all, or many geographical regions represented, and also each one bring a unique angle to this question that we're here for today, a unique perspective. And with that, what I will ask is for each panelist to introduce themselves briefly, personal, and what the important point about FDI is for today, and to get the ball rolling. So we will start with Oliver Rothschild, who is our keynote speaker. He comes all the way from London to talk about FDI, and so I will not really go any further with him for now. We will go on to Farod. And would you please say what your angle on FDI is? What is your key point, and how is it relevant to you?
I'm a director of the UN Technology Center regional for 17 Arab countries from Iraq to Morocco. But I'm going to go against Thor. He keeps on asking the question about what's FDI for me, and I want to go for the other half of the session title, which is Innovation and Technology Transfer.
Uh-huh.
And I will give a couple messages. I hope it will provoke my colleagues on the panel or audience, and especially Thor, because we are in a region, and I'm going to focus on the regional specificity. It's a very specific region that has problems. And I want to tell you, when we talk about the Arab world and you look at it probably as a big market, we talk about innovation. There is no innovation without R&D. I'm an engineer in training. I was engineering professor for 16 years. So 1 + 1 = 2. We don't have innovation without R&D. In the Arab world, all the governments have committed major spending on what they call R&D. But frankly, there is no absorption capacity for all that money. So the multinational corporations, the countries around the world, you have a chance to benefit from what has been allocated for public money research in the Arab world. Lots of money. and you could challenge me later about the amounts. In the Arab world, we have R, we don't have the D. So what's been labeled as R&D or GERD indicator, spending on R&D, it's really under research. We have very little development, and we need your help in the development. Why do we need your help in the development? Because technology transfer, innovation, fortunately, innovation can be trained. 80% of the skills needed for an innovative system or for innovation with people, 80% of those skills can be learned. So that's when we go to the education system. And in this region, we want to go beyond CSR. We want partnership. In the morning, we heard about partnership and what in Harvard Business School they call shared production values, where the headline is, what's good for the community is good for the company, not the other way around. So what's good for the community is excellent for the company, because you have a community that's stronger, you have a stronger market, and you know the rest of the story because I'm in an investment room and I know investors know the story. In our region, in the Arab countries, 50% of the countries are in security or trouble. You hear the news. 50% of the Arab countries almost are in trouble because we have security concerns. We have the highest percentage per capita, if you want, the highest number of refugees per capita. And refugees, typically, UN population studies suggest average duration of refugees, displaced people, over 10 years, almost 15 years. So we're talking about multi-years problem of refugees. These refugees are potential, and we want the whole world, and I'm speaking on behalf of a UN entity in the region. We want everybody to help us capitalize on the potential in the refugees, in the camps, because there is talent. There is talent. These are people. There is talent. And if we don't keep them busy, if we don't attract them to be engaged in the production cycle, other devious, devilish programs are attracting them. And they are magnets that are being attracted for other bad plans. You hear about them from the region, whether it's terrorism or some other names. I'm going to stop at there, and I hope I have thrown enough sparks to provoke some discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Idle hands make trouble, and we will return to the shared production values later. And if there are any questions after Oliver's keynote speak, we will take them at that point. So we move on to James, who came all the way from Brazil, to give his angle and his insight into FDI from a private enterprise perspective, investing into Latin America.
No, thank you, Tor. My name is James Jensen, and I'm living in Bahia, Brazil, a long way from here. And I am a private investor and have a lot of experience by bringing in money to Brazil from Scandinavia and from Europa, and have felt on my own body how the government is not ready to help the investors in the right way, and the lack of the system really don't give us what we need. So we struggle, and not necessarily we could go easily to some other places, and the money will go away if the nuts from the government sides are helping the private investor and the private direct investments. So I'm from the other side here to see what the different governments are doing around the world to help investors. Where is the best place to put the money, and how is other countries helping the investments? And we have, for example, in Brazil, we have a lot of problems with the lack of skilled labor, with a very big bureaucracy, and sorry, I just...
In any case, this is a brief version,
oh, okay.
So we will move on.
So that's my angle is a private investor.
And we will move on to you, Anne. Thank you for coming.
I'm Ann Lowe, and I'm the Deputy Director in the Office of Investment Affairs at the Department of State in Washington. Our office deals with bilateral investment treaties, investment chapters of free trade agreements. We also do the multilateral relationships representing U.S. views to create best practices and norms. And then we also work with our embassies around the world in order to improve the investment climate for U.S. businesses that are investing abroad. And on the other side, we also work with the Department of Commerce on the Select USA initiative, trying to attract foreign investment to the United States. And what I'd like to focus on today are the policies that a government can put in place in order to attract foreign direct investment by entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized enterprises. And what I'll be focusing on is 3 areas: the enforceability of contracts, intellectual property rights protection and enforcement, and finally business facilitation. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Anne. We go on to Sergey.
So my name is Bruno Lanvin. I'm Executive Director of Global Indices at INSEAD, and I'm a French economist. To give you an idea of what that means, please keep in mind that the first economist ever was probably Christopher Columbus, because when he left, he had no idea where he was going. When he arrived, he was not at all where he thought he was, and all of that on public funds. And as far as being French is concerned, one of my favorite definitions is, okay, it works in practice, but does it work in theory? So you have an idea of where I come from when dealing with foreign direct investment. One thing we do at INSEAD is publish the things you may have seen, which are global indices. For instance, this one is about talent, how countries compete with talent, how they become innovators, that's the Global Innovation Index, and how they are ready for using information technology, and that's our Global Information Technology Report. One conclusion that draws from these 3 global approaches is how critically important foreign direct investment is at all levels of development. Yet, FDI is not an end in itself, and that's the main message I'd like to pound from the start. The most successful countries in terms of attracting investment have one thing in common: they know what they want. You have to know what you want foreign direct investment for. Is it for economic diversification? Is it for job creation? Is it for innovation? Is it to develop information infrastructure or to acquire technology or knowledge? All these reasons can be valid, but they need to be spelled out. Once these have been spelled out, you have a strategy, and you're probably going to be more successful at attracting foreign investment. That's what I'd like to develop in the discussion.
Excellent. Well done. Bruno?
My name is Sergey Filipov. I'm Associate Director at the Lisbon Council. It's a think tank in Brussels, and it's named in a reference to the Lisbon Agenda, which was, as you may know, in Europe's strategy to make Europe the most knowledge-based economy in the world, the most advanced economy. Quite recently, we launched a new think tank, which is called the European Digital Forum, and which focuses specifically on web entrepreneurship and digital economy. So that's why I would like to give the first kind of key messages to our discussion, key input, and focus on these issues. So first of all, about innovation. I think, just to be a little bit provocative, I think title technology transfer is a little bit passive. It's in a sense that we passively accept technology developed elsewhere. I would argue that, well, we have the old way that technology was developed somewhere in headquarters, then channeled down to subsidiaries, affiliates, and then would go to local companies. Now we see more and more this kind of collaboration, co-creation, and even decentralized innovation. So innovation made in subsidiaries jointly with local firms, and innovation is understood globally, not only as product innovation, but also business model innovation, service innovation. So that's kind of the first idea, that innovation is everywhere. Secondly, I would like to highlight importance of digital technology. And it's not only about ICT, but we see digital everywhere. Digital technologies have been responsible for huge productivity growth in advanced economies, in things like car manufacturing, for example. It creates new sectors as well. So let's say app economy is completely new now. And also we see digital in things like healthcare, education. Some people are afraid that it will replace jobs, but in fact it creates more jobs, which is very important for in foreign direct investment. Studies in France found that for one job destroyed by the internet, 2.4 new jobs created. So new sectors, new opportunities. And so third point, so we're talking about innovation, about digital technologies, we increasingly see new players, not only large multinational companies, although they're responsible for most of R&D. We see new startups, so-called micro multinationals, that leverage digital technologies and successfully compete and go global. Especially now, barriers to entry are quite low, historically low. You can just launch your business easily in a couple of €1,000 or dollars. We have new platforms, cloud computing, and many of these companies, they go abroad. And large multinationals, they increasingly go to startups searching for new ideas, new products and services. So then we see a lot of this collaboration. So it has huge implications for policy, for investment promotion, but then I guess we discuss in the next round.
Excellent. Thank you.
My name is Kush Choksi. I'm the Vice President for Turkey and the Middle East at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber is the largest business association in the world and in the United States. We are over 100 years old. We represent 3 million American companies. We are non-governmental, absolutely, and we just represent, we are the voice of American business, both domestically and globally. And what I would like to focus my comments on this afternoon are what it takes for American companies, technology companies, defined very broadly, to invest in markets such as the United Arab Emirates, which is, in fact, an incredibly attractive market for American businesses. And conversely, what it would take for an Emirati or company from this region to be able to collaborate or invest in a technology company in the United States, be it in Silicon Valley or in any of the other technology corridors that we have.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
My name is Nasir Abdullahi, and I'm the chairman of Coop Mortgage Bank. We are in the mortgage banking business. We're here to inform our audience of the opportunities that are there in Nigeria in terms of housing. Nigeria, with a debased economy of about $510 billion GDP, our economy was debased last year, and we became the largest economy in Africa. With that comes, we are also the largest, most populous nation in Africa. We have a deficit, a housing deficit of about 17 million housing units. We want to see what kind of technology, what kind of innovation that can assist Nigeria to solve its housing challenges. Because technology is there, the market is there, but the foreign direct investment that is supposed to be attracted is not there. While government has already provided the enabling environment, it has provided policies to support investment. We want to see what kind of opportunities are there for us, and that's why we're here. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Look, we saved the best introduction for last. The word is Oliver Rothschild.
Good afternoon, I'm Oliver Rothschild. Before you get excited, let me tell you I bought my name off the internet 2 weeks ago. That is a joke, but anyway, and we'll take it very seriously. I'm not used to public speaking. I was warned that there'd be at least 1,000 people here, but you are the important people who founded this part of the very big exhibition center to come and hear us speak. I see that I had a big speech prepared, but since my learned panelists have all spoken a little bit, most of what I wanted to say has been taken away from me. I have to agree with Fouad, who thought he was already making a speech and apologized, that most of what he said about the refugee status in this area and youth generation needing to have hope and not fear is an extremely important political element to what we're going to talk about innovation, sustainability, and knowledge transfer. So you have a choice of either my written speech, which I decided to write this morning after I heard our first speech with lots of facts and figures from a very eminent person, or one from the heart. And since we are such a large room, and one that I want to feel that we can relate to between panelists and audience, I will speak just verbatim. To me, even the word FDI didn't mean very much. It's yet another acronym in the modern world of technology, business, and sustainability. And the problem about technologists is that they try to fool their audience, who are mainly the consumers, by using a whole load of acronyms and words and descriptions were completely unintelligible, rather than hearing what they, the public, wanted to have as far as technological advancements which would enable a greater understanding of sustainability, innovation, and knowledge transfer. Now we have a crash between technologists and the public, who are now much more aware. And that public is what all technologists need to be always aware of, is to what the public want. The public want various things. They want knowledge, they want learning, they want education, they want e-health. They want all the things that technology and innovation is able to bring in a world that needs more and more sustainability. We're in a world with ever-increasing population, with far greater pressure, with emerging nations where the demand on energy increases daily. And yet, the important thing is, people like ourselves are aware that education, health, sustainability, knowledge transfer, all the modern buzzwords are important to make this world a much better, safer, and hopefully a happier place. When I was a child, there was a guy speaking about the difference between hope and fear. I only believe in hope. Hope is a very positive word. Fear is very negative. And since I'm most probably the youngest on the panel, I'm only 31 and a half, and you have to believe everything I say, I am giving back, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. I'm well past retirement age. I retired actually 25 years ago, and I went back into business because I enjoyed what innovation and knowledge transfer was bringing. I was somebody who believed in total status quo, old-fashioned, conventional business. And here was this exciting new world of innovation, technology, digital media, none of which I knew. I didn't even know how to switch a computer on 20 years ago. When a computer came to my school many, many years ago, long before you were born, it took up a room that was as large as a dining room in my house. And I said, it will never work. These were famous pronouncements. We are now totally, totally dependent upon devices and all the solutions that devices are now giving us to enable us to cope with this ever large, increasing, demanding world. So from my point of view, as somebody who does not necessarily come from a political angle, but from the entrepreneurial angle, it is important that governments around the world understand the need and the design and the desire to be able to help and encourage this new burgeoning industry of technology, innovation, and knowledge transfer. And if that means increasing sustainability with the side effects of adopting energy policies which make sustainability and reduces pollution, so be it. It is only plus positive things. I am quite aware that I come from a small country in the global affair of the world, which is the UK. But there was quite a phenomenon that happened in the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom has always been an innovative arena, going back to the industrial age. But what it didn't have at the time, when we had the recession, the world recession, was the funding or the will of government really to understand what innovation and knowledge transfer was all about. The great thing was government changed its views, and I'm glad to say that the British ambassador, who I know is not here, so my little politicizing will go unnoticed. But the important thing is, after a year of government, when they said there was no money in the pot, they realized that the little money that there was had to be given to encourage innovation and entrepreneurialism. And what happened? Within 2 years, we were able to confound and confuse the IMF and the OECD in their figures, and we have emerged as now one of the strongest GDPs and economies in Europe. And why? The reason was entrepreneurialism and young SME startup companies. In our small population, more than 1 3/4 new companies were started. And even though there may have been a high rate of failure, the whole point is their contribution to the economy in being able to produce products, in being able to take the strain out of unemployment, and to be able to give the multiplier effect that's so important, was a phenomenon that now leads the UK to being one of the most strong economies in Europe. So my message to you today is work with government and get government to understand how important it is to be able to encourage this wonderful, new, exciting era that we're in of knowledge transfer, sustainability, and innovation. Thank you very much indeed.
On your last points about the SMEs, and Anne, that goes for you. How to best protect SMEs, and also how best to stimulate SME investment, and also spillover effects domestically from FDI to development of the SME sector. Please.
Thank you. Basically, if you're trying to help small and medium-sized enterprises, the policies that you should put in place are also the policies that are good for attracting direct foreign investment. With small and medium-sized enterprises, some of the big obstacles to actually being successful in the business are potentially governments, regulations, and the laws that are in place when they're not transparent. And that's where business facilitation comes into play. Because anytime an entrepreneur, if you imagine you're a startup, it's one guy, and he's got to run his business, and at the same time he's got to figure out how to register his business, how to get licenses. If all of that is too complicated, he'll make the choice not to register his business and to be informal. And that's one of the biggest challenges in developing countries, that there's an enormous problem of informality, which means that those businesses, if they don't register, they can't get bank accounts, they can't get loans to grow their businesses, and the government's deprived of the tax revenues that they would have been able to generate. So one of the key things is making sure that procedures are online and that they're easy to follow. And actually, in that regard, I'll take this opportunity. We've done a joint initiative with the Kauffman Foundation's Global Entrepreneurship Week and with UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, to develop a new website. It's ger.co, and it's the world's first platform that has links to all the business registration websites that are available in one place. And if you go to the website, you'll see not all countries even put their business registration processes online. And that, of course, is a huge obstacle to a small and medium-sized enterprise because they won't know what to do. And the other area that, if there's time, I'll take the opportunity to talk about is intellectual property protection. Because that also, if you're a small business and if your comparative advantage is your intellectual property, be it a patent, copyright, trademark, or trade secrets, if those can be stolen with impunity, you're going to lose your business. So you're only going to invest and grow your businesses in locations where you know your rights are going to be protected. And that makes a challenge for governments, that they first need to make a process in place to make it easy to register your patent or copyright or trademark. Then they need to have a legal system in place to enforce those rights. And then they need to enforce them at the border using technology So their customs officials will be stopping counterfeits. And if a country does all of that, if you make business facilitation, if you focus on intellectual property rights protection, and then if you also have a legal system that protects contracts, those are really 3 areas that governments can work on in partnership with businesses that create the environment that's good for entrepreneurs and good for small and medium-sized enterprises.
Absolutely, that self-supporting ecosystem of protection and SME and innovation. Look, Sergey, you work with digital entrepreneurship and startups. Can you recognize what Anne was talking about?
Yes, so that's I fully agree with the statements, and also would suggest very specific policy recommendations for digital startups and web entrepreneurship. For example, first of all would be digital infrastructure. So what we see even in Europe and US, digital gaps, so some communities, some cities are not connected through broadband, so it's absolutely essential for any services, for example, for this e-registration online businesses, so you need broadband infrastructure. Digital skills, so I think it's very important now to teach kids, in schools, coding. For example, in Europe, we have up to 1,000 vacancies in ICT unfilled by 2020, so it's a big problem. So many, emerging economies can capitalize on this opportunity and proactively teach coding. Things like also data protection, it's also very important that how can you operate if you don't know what data can be stored legally, so we have all these discussions. I would support fully less bureaucracy, do things online, easy registration, I fully agree. In Europe, we have cases like Estonia, you can be e-citizen, e-resident, just do it online, all things. It's very transparent, very efficient. Things like access to venture capital, we kind of talk a lot about it. And, should I continue? Because
talk a bit about the venture capital, what kind of role that plays in your mind for your industry sectors, for your digital startups, for instance.
Well, I can elaborate. It's a European problem that we don't have enough access to venture capital, so I'm not sure. I guess it's even worse in many emerging economies. Just what we know in US, it's only 20% of capital is provided by banks and 80% by non-bank institutions. In Europe, it's vice versa. It's 80% provided by banks. So if banks are not doing well, as we've seen, it's very difficult for startups to get access to capital. Now we are launching this capital markets union, but I'm going too much on the European side, I guess. Yeah.
Because, you're very much in the thick of that with Silicon Valley. What have you done? What kind of policies have you done to help foreign direct FDI, both inwards into Silicon Valley, but also from the Silicon Valley businesses internationally?
Sure. And if you take a step back and you look at the broad technology arena, you have the traditional technology and IT companies. So let's keep that as one type of bucket of companies, and I'll speak to your issues momentarily, but I want to give kind of the enabling background pitch on it. Then you have the new economy companies, the sharing economy companies, from companies that are doing ride-sharing services to companies that enable people to draw upon short-term workers. Then you have big data, and that's playing a big role in traditional industries from General Electric to across the board, the manufacturing sector to the service sector. And then you have biotech and the whole health sector that is also benefiting from technology. And so you have the traditional players, but you also have what cumulatively you can look at entities that kind of disrupt the economy. And when you look at how in the United States, there has been a certain element of government, but pretty much the sector has grown thanks to the absence of government. And I think that that is a key lesson learned for countries. You do need to have the ease of doing business to attract American companies and the flexibility, but you also need to recognize that they are not just companies in the traditional technology sense of it. One example of an American company that is looking at the United Arab Emirates is Uber, the rideshare company. That is as traditional as an industry as you can think about. It's unionized typically, and certainly in our country, unfortunately. It is highly regulated, again, unfortunately, and you still have technology disrupting it. So one of the lessons learned for many countries is regulatory flexibility and open-mindedness to open up your economy, even in traditional areas, to enable technology to come in there. The second, of course, is capital. But, you know, I think that sometimes capital is overstated. This is certainly not a region of the world that lacks capital or an access to capital. It is how capital is deployed. And that's something in terms of how, if you've looked at the ecosystem we have in Silicon Valley, that again is another area. And then the last point is incubators. And incubators can be formal centers that help spur entrepreneurship, but they can also be through the form of consulting firms that specialize in this and are able to guide companies in their early stages. So three things again: regulatory flexibility, how capital is deployed and accessed, not just the fact that there is that there is capital, and then the third issue of incubators and the learning process.
Excellent. So let me just turn to you, Nasir. How do you think that, for instance, Nigeria stacks up on those three criteria? Is that applicable in your home market?
It's not quite applicable to our market because we are an emerging economy. And certainly, unlike the United Arab Emirates, we lack capital. So we like to attract the right capital to the right places. And one of those places is, like I was introducing, is housing. Through housing, first, you are able to provide a need that is basic to the society. But then comes with it the technology, because in housing you have to provide water, you have to provide sanitation, you have to provide electricity, and all these are challenges that Nigeria is going through. We have the right policies where for electricity, for example, is already privatized from generation to transmission and distribution. And if you come to the other sectors also, Nigeria is a very free place for foreign direct investment, but we are not getting what we are supposed to get, considering the size of the economy. And the government so far has made so much laws and enabling environment to attract the necessary capital and technology. And we see housing as one key sector that can enable us to achieve so many goals at once. We are not there yet, but we think with what the government has done in the previous years, we should get the appropriate direct investment that could take us to where we need. Like I said, we have 17 million deficit. We're a population of over 170 million, and it's growing. And if we have 17 million deficit in housing units by the World Bank standards that was done about 5 years ago, which means it must have jumped up now, we need the right innovation of technology to tackle these challenges. Probably we need to also open up or provide the right laws that could protect investments. So these are some of the key factors that differentiate us from the other regions like the UAE.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bruno, what do you think is the best policy mix to accomplish including these objectives, including the 3 points from Kosh?
Well, I'd like to bounce back on what both Anne and Oliver said before. and underline the importance of facilitation and transparency, not just for SMEs, but when you want to attract foreign investors, indeed, building your policies around what is transparent, what is easy to understand, and what is easy to implement and to comply with is critically important. I am, as an entrepreneur, I am paying taxes in 4 different countries. I will not name any country, including my own, France, but it's more complicated to pay taxes in some countries than in others. Comparatively, I'm paying more taxes in another country than in my own, and I'm happy to pay more taxes there because it's so easy. They almost make it enjoyable to pay taxes. So the transparency and the facilitation are key ingredients in any kind of policy. I would add a third one, which is stability. You want an investor to make a long-term kind of commitment. You have to offer some guarantee, quote unquote, in your policies that things are not going to change next year, even if the government changes. They are not going to be retroactive, which is even worse. So at least you give a horizon by which an investor can make a reasonable business decision. I think if you put together those 3 elements of facilitating, making things transparent, and making things predictable, you have a good recipe for any kind of policy. And what Oliver said about government struck me, that is, we have to make governments understand. And clearly, there are some environments in which bridges or segues exist between the private sector and the public sector. I don't think you can be a good regulator or a good policymaker about investment if you have not been at some point in time an entrepreneur or an investor yourself. And we still have too many cultures in which there's a total separation between the world of public affairs and the world of private businesses. And if we can encourage more people from the private sector to acquire an experience in government and vice versa, to recruit more people in government who have a business experience, we're going to have better policies.
Yeah, we probably also would, create more jobs because, job creation is not a problem in the United States.
So the IP situation is important. But what Bruno said about companies being understood by governments and governments understanding, and the people in government who are there to encourage businesses. The problem is, certainly in Europe, too many people are what we call backroom boys, analysts, researchers, etc., who get given the government positions. And again, if I may use an example, I hope there are not too many people from the British government here. We have something called the UKTI, United Kingdom Trade and Investment Office, of which I'm an ambassador. Even though I'm an ambassador, I hardly get to hear what they do. And I give my services for free. I met a lady who was a fantastic speaker with the UKTI, and I went up to her afterwards and I said, I need your card. She said, I'll give you my card, but unfortunately there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, I'm leaving in a week. May I introduce you to the person who's taking my position? And behind her was a person about 50. He was a pen pushing bookkeeper who'd never had the pizzazz that this lady who'd done a little tour in the UKTI had done. It is highly, highly important to do so. And then the last point that I want to about the knowledge transfer is that all knowledge transfer is there not just for businesses to succeed, it is there for the giving back, it's for the sharing economy. And that is a huge movement now, certainly in the West, about the sharing economy, not because there isn't profit to be made, only because of the force of the public now who want to feel that there's transparency. The old words CSR, forget that. There's got to be ethicality and transparency. And those companies, whether large or small, that perpetrate that ethos are the ones that will succeed, because at the end of the day, their stakeholders, the clients, are the ones who understand that and will support them greater than those who ignore that situation.
Thank you. CSR is out. And knowledge sharing and shared production values is one of the factors that the population at large wish for. Now, let me just ask: do you agree with that statement, Fode?
I'm going to be practical. I'm going to be practical in this room and agree and propose something that we can do tomorrow. In this region, building on everything I mentioned and characterized the region with misfortunes, We need to rebuild Syria. Over 2 million houses have been destroyed. And you could count Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Gaza and Palestine, and so on. We cannot rebuild the region with cement. There isn't enough cement to do it. We cannot rebuild, and talking about construction in Nigeria, we cannot rebuild the region in traditional construction material because we don't have enough water to do it. There is no water in Yemen, ladies and gentlemen. There is not enough water in Syria to rebuild Syria the conventional, traditional way. So can we be innovative? Can we be partners with multinational corporations and US companies, British companies, whatever? But you need the partnership with the local community, the local universities and research centers so that you could develop solutions that are very specific to these regions, and the need is huge, the capacity is there, and let's go for it.
I just wanted to follow on that. I think that's one of the key issues is that we're focusing on direct foreign investment, but there's an enormous potential for innovation by the people in the host country, that if they have a good enabling environment, they can find the new building materials that they need in order to achieve their goals. And since they're local, they'll know what the constraints are, but they have to have the incentive structure in place. They have to know that if they invent something new, they're going to be able to benefit from it financially. And it's not just going to be expropriated or not protected. And so unless those protections get in place, you're constantly dependent on somebody else deciding, oh, that problem is serious enough that we should take a look at it, when in fact you should trust that your own people are going to be able to find solutions.
Excellent. Bruno?
Thank you, Tor. Again, I wanted to bounce back on what Oliver told us before about empty acronyms and going back to IP. I once created the IAOPWHA, which is the International Association of People Who Hate Acronyms. I invite everybody to join, it's free. But it's true that we have practice, especially in international organizations. I worked 20 years in the UN and 10 years at the World Bank, so I learned a few things about acronyms. And sometimes it hides the reality of the issue. IP is a good example. I'm also a member of the board of ICANN, so we look at internet issues, and if you say IP, everybody thinks internet protocol. And you have to say, oh, it's also about intellectual property. And it reminds me of what I heard from one of our partners in our Global Innovation Index, Francis Gurry, who is the Director General of WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization in the UN. And he made his own campaign when he tried to be elected, saying IP should cease to be about intellectual property. It should be about investment promotion. And I think it translates the whole momentum that we all see, all of us who have been working in all these countries, seeing the young people, the talent, the entrepreneurs. The raw material is there. And what they need is the proper climate to actually develop into successful entrepreneurs. FDI can help. It can help when it brings technology, when it brings capital. But in the end, as Anne just said, let's not underestimate the local potential, because in the longer run, this is what will make a difference. It's the local potential. And the example that Fouad was giving is particularly telling. That is, if we ignore that one of the key problems in the Middle East is the problem of water, we may design the wrong solutions. We may say, okay, what is needed is to build new schools and new hospitals. But if we don't think of new ways of making concrete and cement that are less intense in using water, we may miss a solution that may be better adapted. And only the local people will actually say where their priorities are. So combining foreign investment and foreign capital with the local knowledge, giving an opportunity to local talent to develop into successful entrepreneurs is a key ingredient to success.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to just, if you could just follow up on that one. In terms of job creation, it's also crystal clear that job creation is a big challenge in Europe, and it's a very big challenge
in the Middle East. And it creates problems that they in some ways dwarfs some of FDI's issues that we talk about, the lack of creating jobs quick enough. So we have a lot of understimulated youth and well-educated youth, and we're in danger of losing a lot of people in that sense, who then turn against the system because the system is not really fair to them. And that is a big undermine of society at large, and hence of the attractiveness of FDI. Are there anybody who would like to respond to that statement? Yeah.
It's not just the issue of fair treatment. Is the issue of a keyword that Oliver also pronounced in his keynote, which is hope. How can you hope of being recognized as a contributor to your own society if you're not actually holding a decent job? 150 million is the figure we now use to define the job creation horizon in the MENA region altogether. It's a massive challenge. And it's, I think, important to compare the situation of this region, which is by and large a high growth region, to that of Europe, which is a low growth region. And Sergei was mentioning that before. In Europe right now, we have 26 million people unemployed. The rate of people unemployed who are below 25 is 51% in Spain, 54% in Greece. That's the order of magnitude. Yet, if you look at those 26 million people unemployed, you have to recognize that there's 600,000 unfilled vacancies in the IT sector. So something is wrong somewhere in terms of our own education system, in terms of our own migration policies, in terms of our own fluidity or absence of fluidity in the labor market that should make these vacancies filled. For a part of the world like the Middle East, but also for Africa, for large parts of Asia, it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to show that talent is probably the raw material which is the more evenly distributed at the surface of this planet. And there are young people here in Dubai, in the Emirates, in other parts of the Middle East, who are boiling to actually show what they can do with these tools. Let's give them an opportunity, and we'll have better results in the side of growth, on the side of diversification, and all together in making FDI a positive sum game.
I think that's a beautiful statement. Are there any questions from the audience? We could take a few. We got one here, the lady in red. Could you pass a microphone to the lady, please?
Hello, thank you everybody. I'm Dr.
Speak up, please.
I'm Dr. Mohga Basim from the University of Buckingham in the UK. I would like to direct my question for you, sir, about the foreign direct investments for refugees. How can we direct foreign direct investments for refugees? I was in contact with one of the camps, Za'atariya camp, and they were suffering a problem of school attendance of young people. They don't want to attend school because they don't provide food. So when they started providing food, students start to go to the school. So how can we help them? Thank you.
Yeah? That's for United Nations.
In the refugees camps, it's total communities. I mean, we're talking about millions of people. And they have all the talents that you would find typically in any Middle Eastern community, whether it's Cairo or Tunisia or so on. We have to be creative. We have a huge incentive. We have self-interest in engaging them. Not to be nice to them, to be nice to us, to be nice to the world, because they are being recruited by other programs, which are devious, obviously. And we want to engage them in the economic production cycle and in the education, but being creative, deploying the ICT tools, for example, in education. And I know that UNRWA is participating and partnering with Intel and a few other multinational corporations, I don't want to mention and skip a few, to really serve this need. Education using technology, and engage them with some productivity and some production cycles and production plants that are in the community in Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey, wherever they are, so that the community doesn't feel they are load on them. They are load from a security point of view, social point of view, economic point of view, you name it. So when they are engaged, producing and given value added to the local economic cycle, and the multinational corporation can play, and FDI can play a huge role because they have an interest in it, not to be CSR, or in this part of the world we call it zakat. No, it's a very good bottom line business proposition.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Emery, Chairman of Funding Lab. My question is about exploring whether we can popularise philanthropic giving as opposed to just the conventional charitable giving. For example, Funding Lab's an organisation that I've set up over the last year. We've been developing a crowdfunding platform, and the idea is we're supporting youth in developing emerging economies through local incubators. So, for example, we signed agreements with Lums University in Pakistan and Plan 9, some of the leading incubators there. And the idea is to introduce a crowdfunding model to the incubation cycle, helping them to gain seed funding at that critical stage before venture capitalists or business angels would look at the business. My question is, people are used to charitable giving for earthquakes, disasters, all sorts of things like that. But can we reach out to the public and engage them in philanthropic giving, which will actually make a longer-term difference to the places we're talking about, the refugee camps and some of the failing economies where there's talented youth but very little opportunity?
Well, then it's very fortunate you have one of the world's foremost charity experts in the room today. Oliver, would you give that a response, please?
You've come to the crux of the matter between charity and philanthropy, and I actually make speeches on this because charity is a one-off payment. It's a type of, I've done my bit, here's the payment. Philanthropy is the see-through of what you're doing, so I think it's very important. By the way, I do know your organization, and I actually, even last night, funded a social enterprise 2 minutes before the end of their thing I did in my room at 2 o'clock in the morning. I invest in a lot of social enterprise because it's halfway between business and philanthropy, irrespective of my philanthropic arena, which, if you know about me, I have quite several, and I'm not looking for any accolade, because I believe philanthropy leads to better education, better health, a happier society, etc. I'm not here to write a check and give the person the money for the cup of tea. If he wants the cup of tea, I will take that person, have a cup of tea and give him a bun as well, and make sure what's his story. So I think what you're doing and what many other organizations of the sharing and caring economy is doing, and not only the micro version, but as Fuad is talking about, the macro version, is the way to go. Because we are, I had a speech from somebody the other day saying we're in a pressure pot, and that pressure cooker cannot hold that pressure anymore. And I mean, it sounds like 1 minute to midnight, but we are very much, certainly in this region and other regions of the world, very much under that pressure. And all philanthropic efforts meant genuinely, have a payback. And that is, if they're all united, we add the sum total, all the micro and the macro together, it can only be a help to solving some of the many issues that we have. So well done to you, and thank you for the question.
Can I comment, Tor, on this? Tor, can I comment on the incubator story?
Absolutely. And then certainly,
I want to relate this to the famous speech of President Obama 2009 in Cairo, labeled science diplomacy, honestly, when he called for establishing centers of excellence in the Islamic developing world so that they could do technology transfer and innovation and so on. And when we looked at the region now, 2015, we found over 300 initiatives in the Arab regions, in the Arab countries, some of them called incubators, accelerators, science park, technology park, and so on. If you look at them, they are not working properly. The biggest problem is the deal flow. We don't have people applying. If you're in Amman, Jordan, you have 4 or 5 incubators, competing to recruit one candidate. It should be the other way around. There should be a queue, and people are evaluated who should be coming in the incubator. So the problem and all the capacity we have in the Arab region goes back to the universities, to the education, and that's why we're working with the universities in the region to establish technology transfer and IP policies in the universities, so that we prepare generation that have entrepreneurship curricula, in the curricula, entrepreneurship and education, and the deal flow into the incubation and science park and technology park can be secured, because that's where the capacity is in the universities, but we're not giving them the right tools.
My name is Sarat Umar. I'm the CEO of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission. I would like to just have a comment and a little question. Just to add a bit to what Nasru said earlier, that we do have a lot of investment opportunities. And I would like to invite everyone here for our counter presentation tomorrow at 10 a.m. After saying that, I would also like to ask one or two, just one question, and it's thrown open, because I see a number of the discussants of there are policy personnel. I want to find out from your experiences that what has been the impact on when countries decide to change policy from having 100%, allowing 100% repatriation of profits by multinationals, and maybe allow or change the policy to saying you should leave part of it in the particular country you invested in. Can you just give us a little bit insight on that?
So whether it's allowed to repatriate profits and the free capital flows as opposed to less so. That's a question. Who would like to answer that question?
As far as free investment flows, when a country prevents the repatriation of funds, that's an enormous obstacle to direct foreign investment. That's one of the very key things that any investor expects when they invest abroad. In all of our bilateral investment treaties and investment chapters of free trade agreements, that's a requirement that there wouldn't be any obstruction to the free flow of funds.
I think it's fair to say that the experience really points to that is a deal killer. Really anything, because it's not a half solution. It's worse than that to impose restrictions. The absolute underpinning is a free flow of capital. That's the evidence pointing in that direction. We have a gentleman. I think that will be the last question that we have time to take, really.
Thank you very much for giving me this chance. My name is Dr. Tijani. I am an economist working in Abu Dhabi Economic Development, and I'm a bit concerned about R&D and innovation and transfer of technology. Actually, I do agree with the first gentleman who spoke about the poor environment in our countries regarding the first R&D. If you look to the budget of R&D in most of the Arabic countries is less than 2% of the GDP. But comparatively, if you look to other countries, advanced countries, OECD countries, or American countries, 2.8% out of 16 trillion. South Korea, 1.7% out of 1.7 trillion. That means in order to build a knowledge, by the way, I'm specialized in the knowledge economy, to build this knowledge economy, we need budget, we need education, we need skilled labor, we need a lot of facilities to build this society. It is not that easy. To build the infrastructure of knowledge economy, it takes a long time. For China, it took more than 20 years. The World Bank was working with China more than 20 years, working with Korea, with India, working after Second World War, working with Japan. All this has been built. Here we are speaking about transfer of knowledge. Transfer of knowledge Before 2 years, I have been in Oxford University. They are working on just research or transfer of knowledge for 24 years, and not yet. It is a very huge process. And after that, after you build the infrastructure of higher foreign direct investment, the others will come and build on it. The most important, education, education of people, institution, a lot of things we need to do. And I hope our recommendation for this talk, that what we will do next year, we ask the government to increase, we do this small thing. We ask the government to increase the budget of R&D. If we did this, I think this meeting is very successful, and thank you very much.
Just one comment on this.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah. In this region, we have been asked by governments, such as the government of the UAE, where we are, to help them know how to spend what they allocated for R&D. They allocated a lot more than they can spend. No, let me continue, please. So, when we looked at the number in the world, such as the UK or other developed countries, you have highest percentage of GERD, which is percentage of spend from the GDP on R&D, higher than anywhere else in the Arab world for sure, or developing countries. But if you dissected R versus D, we find ourselves close to them in the R part. Why? Because there is a private sector in the developed modern countries. The private sector is spending on the D, and that pushes the number up. But I can't ask the UAE government to allocate more money for R&D, public money. I think they're allocating more than they should, honestly. We need the private sector to get engaged and have incentives to spend on development. And then we have the R&D, because so far we're spending public money on R, which it's not going to do it.
Fawd, I just two things I want to pick up, and I'll come back to you. Absolutely, we need the R&D, but you can't be too disappointed. I have a bio and nanotech fund in Barcelona and Spain. Plethora of knowledge. Can I get that fund together with local money in Catalonia, which is part of it very wealthy? No. Why? Because they've been so used to land, olive growing, winemaking, and a bit of tourism that they haven't even entered the new psychology of investing in new non-conventional businesses. So this is already an old European country where the attitude still has to be changed. So your frustration, I fully understand, and I can only say that it is a learning process. Can I talk very quickly about repatriation? My mother happened to have been a director of an Indian company for 15 years, so I know a little about the Indian continent. India did something very interesting. In the 70s, it did reverse repatriation. There was a lot of hot money outside India. The Indian government decided to give an amnesty to this money. And they expected about £4 billion to come in. In actual fact, nearly 12 to 15 billion came in, which in the 70s was a huge amount. And that, I believe, kick-started the Indian economy to the economy it's now. Because all of a sudden, this money was coming in to kick-start things that the government couldn't do and start this real thrust of commercialism that now puts India, for all its other problems, it's seen as a very big economy. As far as the R and the D is concerned, yes, absolutely. Private partnerships with industry and commerce is the way to go. Government cannot be expected to do that. They have to be encouraged. Again, you have the problem. Large companies do not understand about innovation. They're trying to buy innovation. I happen to be the chairman of Innovation Warehouse, one of the largest incubator hubs in London. We get FTSE 350 companies coming in to visit us because they want to see innovation. I laugh at my secretary. They're not going to see innovation. They're not going to see anything other than 50 odd companies. They have to understand that to innovate needs to be a stimulus within their environment, within their culture. You can't buy it. And this is a big problem that big industries now, and some of them have the money just to buy innovation, but still not solving the problem of encouraging and putting the funding into where innovation really comes. And you don't have to be young, but you have to have a young culture and be unconventional, disruptive, all those big words to be able to do so.
Excellent, excellent. And that would be the final question from the audience, and that would be the final response from you, Anne.
Thank you for that special position.
Yeah.
I just wanted to reiterate, because in looking at like getting research and development at the base level, you have to have the companies that are incorporated, so you have to have the business facilitation in place, and you have to have the contracts that are enforceable, and you also need the intellectual property protection. And just to put that in perspective, for instance, intellectual property protection, it's actually enshrined in the US Constitution. So it's that fundamental to creating the incentives for innovation, at least it's been in the United States. And then with those, being able to set up a business and know that it's going to, your contracts will be enforceable, and then also having intellectual property protection. In the United States, we had kind of a bottleneck. The government was giving money for basic research and development, but not enough products were actually turning into innovations and being available to consumers. So in 1980, they passed the Bayh-Dole Act, which allowed, it made a partnership between the government giving basic research money and then the universities and professors at the universities actually owning that intellectual property in part. They do a contract every time, and they have to commercialize what they invent. So that's the requirement. You get the money, but then you have to, when you have invented something, you have to bring it into market. So all of our big research universities have technology transfer offices that are bringing those products out to market, and that's made an enormous difference in the United States in terms of being innovative and actually getting products out to market. So it's an enormous challenge getting a good investment environment, but basically it's a lot of building blocks that all you can do is start and then just get better every year. Thank you.
And then very briefly, before I summarize up.
Yeah, I just want to salute the last question we had from the audience, because I believe it's symbolic and very important that the final note we heard from the audience is about education. Innovation, as we all know, is a combination of three elements, which are talent, money, and markets. Markets can be reached globally now better than they've ever been reachable before. Money depends largely on foreign direct investment. Talent has to be grown locally. And if we look at what the most successful economies around this planet have been doing lately, it's been to attract investment in growing talent locally. The United Arab Emirates is one example. We in SEAT would not be in Abu Dhabi if there had not been that appetite, but all our main competitors are there also. So, and that's normal. That's a way to go. Singapore has gone the same way. So attracting investment towards education is also part of good policy on FDI. And by the way, going back to the previous question about retaining earnings locally, I totally agree that keeping the flow as free as possible is a key ingredient in attracting investment, but it's also up to the host countries to provide new opportunities for the investors to want to keep their capital there. And investing in growing talent locally is a good bet for the longer term. So it may be an incentive to indeed keep some of that capital in the countries where investment has taken place in the first place.
The common, I would say, areas is very much trust. When we are approaching, for instance, we look into innovations into hospitals, and we talk with nurses, we talk with medical staff, sometimes they don't have any self-esteem because they think that they're not a professor. And I think it's very, very important that to populate incubators with developing these kind of things. And I think that dealing with IP and legal help, if you approach a good incubator, they will tell you exactly what to do with IP. If you have to file for IP, or speed of execution is more important. Funding as well, it's not always important because you have to be able to connect the dots. And I think that a good incubator should be mom and dad and dating agency. I think that's the way it should work. That's my final comment. Thanks.
Would you like a response from a particular panelist who feel inspired?
I think he's touching on the cultural items that are very important for the ecosystem to really work. And again, the culture item cannot be copy-paste from Silicon Valley to Dubai or to Doha or Riyadh. I'm engaged with Qatar Foundation on a program called Stars of Science on a TV broadcast to really affect the culture of the youth. So we have a reality TV program to encourage the youth. Yes, we have hope, we can do it, we can contribute, we can invent, we can produce.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is that very well-to-do Qataris or Saudis are working in petroleum companies. They leave their job and they come to participate in a TV program and innovation, and they leave very highly paid jobs. And I say, why are you here to compete with young kids, even though you graduated 5 years ago and you have a very nice office and a tower? And they said, we're bored. So the cultural values, they want to feel relevant to their community. They want to feel that they can contribute, they can apply what they're learning in the textbook into producing something. So what excites GCC youth towards innovation and science is very different than the US or Europe. If job security probably means a lot to kids in the US or young people in the US, job security will not mean much to somebody in GCC, young guy. But what they care about, for example, is being recognized in their community that they are scientists and they are producers and they are inventors. I'm giving an example, just one concept related to the culture and the importance of localizing entrepreneurship values.
Excellent, thank you very much. Can I please have the 10 lessons here? Yeah. Now, as part of we're wrapping up, and what I will say is that as part of this aim, a questionnaire was sent around to about 40 FDI agencies around the world, and based on the responses from those answers, and they touch a lot on the same points that we've touched upon today. And I just want to say, 10 important lessons certainly that we can summarize both from today and from the questionnaire and from other evidence. The first one really is for countries who want to have benign effects of FDI is play on strength, play on your strength, as opposed to be something that you're not. And also reverse engineer your policies from your objectives. What are we trying to accomplish? The most successful FDI policies and conducive policies are the ones that start with what are we trying to accomplish, what are the objectives, and then reverse engineer from there. For instance, as we can see here in the UAE, very successful in building a knowledge-based society, and thank you also to UAE for providing this platform that we all come here to share our knowledge on international issues. The other big one is to create incentives. We talked about tax incentives, and very much so also the free flow of capital, absolutely essential. And as Anne has reiterated, the protection of foreign IPR and the protection of investors is so critical. Of course, it goes without saying. Now, remove red tape is probably one of the most important ones, really. We talk about the ease of doing business. Removing red tape is so important, and it's just still so common in the world. When we talk about sustainability, we talk about that. That's very much job creation. It's about, if we think about sustainability, we talk about the E and the S and the G. The E for the environmental side, the ecological, the green side. We have the S for society, and job creation is just so critical, as many panelists has talked about today. And of course, good governance is important, because without a proper good governance at society level, at the institutional level, and at the individual business level, at the board level of the private enterprises, it all becomes futile. The legal system has to be strong, and the institutional framework has to be strong as well. Of course, what we're trying to accomplish, it was not this slide actually, it was the 10 lessons if you have them on the slide projector. But in any case, what we're trying to do is, of course, to stimulate innovation and technology transfer. And one of the keys for that, of course, is also having very well functioning capital markets. We talked about earlier what was the key to India's success. Well, one was that jump-started it, but also that actually they started having proper registration and a proper capital markets with the stock exchange functioning as a present actually from America as it was at the time. And that really, because until then it was written on the back of a note in some back room, and that doesn't give investor confidence. It's very important to respect the ownership rights. And of course, important it is to, if you put policies in place, well, be transparent about it and then communicate it, publicize it so the world hears about it, and also push your attractiveness. Why should people come to your country? Promotion is certainly also key. With that, I will say thank you so much to the panel. I think we should give them a hand. I hope you have enjoyed it.